he likes to embarrass people much more physical, much more openly aggressive. He would literally pull Emmanuel Macron. He would yank Macron's arm, angry or hateful or disgusted. She almost certainly would be able to destroy both his reputation and probably his presidency. It prevents Trump from actually having to touch her, which she may even find upsetting or disgusting. My name is Professor Harry Witchel, and I am a communications expert specializing in nonverbal communication, which some people call body language. And I'm in the Department of Clinical Neuroscience at Brighton and Sussex Medical School on the University of Sussex campus. Okay. Wow. In this video, you can see Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump having a set piece, which is on handshakes. They've been doing these handshakes for many years now. In the early days, Donald Trump, who was quite belligerent and also strong-willed, would literally pull Emmanuel Macron. He would yank Macron's arm and it would knock Macron off balance because, of course, Trump is a very big person and Macron is much smaller. But Trump has moved on from that, and now they're still trying to do a handshake of dominance. In this case, Trump has come down. The idea in a handshake is that the hand above is the dominant hand and the hand below is the submissive hand. And here, Trump is trying to somehow maintain dominance. Macron has more of a sense of humor about this because, of course, this has been going on. These little games have been going on with Trump for years. And Macron, in the end, taps Trump as they leave to let him know that it's still a friendly game. It's just joshing. So maybe what I should do is start with a structure or a thought. Many people say that Donald Trump just doesn't change, that over the years, the one constant about Donald Trump is who he is. But I would tend to disagree. Donald Trump has changed recently. There's a great change between Trump in the first presidency and Trump in the second presidency in terms of body language. In the old days, Donald Trump's body language was much more physical, much more openly aggressive. Whereas now, his body language is much more sophisticated, it's more urbane, it's more understated. So one way of thinking about this is how people express dominance. Dominance can be expressed either by a very physical and active kind of dominance. That is, like a cat about to spring or a lion about to spring. You can look like you're ready for anything or even overwhelm people physically in the immediate moment, which is something that Donald Trump used to do with all of his old yanking handshakes. But there's another way of being dominant, which is to stand up absolutely straight and calm and with a very good posture, act as if nothing could possibly bother you. Nothing worries you. As if you were, how shall I say this? As if you've got an understated but absolute and unshakable confidence in your dominance. As if to say, I'm not afraid of you. I'm so powerful and my strength of my people and myself are so great that there's nothing you could do that could either surprise to me or get to me. And whatever you try, I will be able to stop it. Donald Trump has moved more toward, in this current administration, more toward this latter kind of dominance, where he is much more confident, more slow-moving, more verbal, if anything, rather than trying to get the better of people by physically jerking them around. He's much more likely now to use an understated verbal attack, like a subtle dig, to embarrass people. And in particular, he likes to embarrass people, particularly Europeans, on one particular issue, which is whether or not they're being polite and looking into the rules of etiquette. I think the reason that Donald Trump has made this change are twofold. One is that Donald Trump is older. He's now 78. So that's not to say that he's old or he's lost any of his ability or has lost his mental faculties, like some people foolishly claim. Donald Trump's mental faculties are quite obvious. And if you watch him at any of his news, interviews with the press, where he takes questions on literally any topic for 30 minutes at a time, he's plainly all there, completely focused in the moment, and although he may not always say things and have complete grasp of all the facts, he's willing to make a go of almost any question. He's very confident and surprisingly knowledgeable given the state that he's in and the age he's in. Donald Trump is in a completely different league from Joe Biden. The other reason I think that Donald Trump has changed is because he's understood the story of his life. I think for much of Donald Trump's early life, his goal was to become one of the elite, the people with real money in New York, the investment capital of the world. Donald Trump was basically born as a scrappy, dyslexic crass kid from Queens. And he wanted to make the big time in Manhattan. And for years, Donald Trump has been trying to break in among investors and to be with the big boys, the big shots in terms of money. But after all these years, I think now that Donald Trump is 78, he's realized, I'm not saying his life is over, but he's realized he knows the story of his life. He is never going to be accepted by the financial elites of America. That's not going to happen. Rather, the story of his life is that he's been scrappy and he's managed to cut his own swathe through all of life and to create an immense amount of what can only be described as success in terms of politics and finance by just being scrappy and himself. That his followers are never going to be the other New York elite, the financial geniuses of Manhattan. Rather, his base are these people that he calls his base, the overlooked, the dispossessed, that these people who are middle class, white, often male, not necessarily completely educated, these are the people that he really is speaking to, and they are looking after him and they really appreciate him. So what are the real changes that this change has occurred, that has driven? So, for example, when Trump and Macron are talking and having a laugh, there's this amazing scene where you can see Emmanuel Macron laughing, but with his eyes closed. It's a genuine, powerful emotion. And this moment, if you just look at it without the sound, it's hard to tell if we're really talking about laughter, extreme, hilarious laughter, or pain. It's a very similar look to his face being in agony. And when you listen to the full tape, though, when you see the context in which they speak, it becomes obvious that actually it's a little of both. That is, that Trump is telling a story. It's a funny story about Emmanuel Macron and him in Trump's last visit to Paris. And in that story, Trump says that after they've had a discussion, Trump watches Macron start talking French really quickly. And Trump, of course, who doesn't, as far as we know, doesn't speak any foreign languages, despite the fact that he's been married for over 50 years to different Eastern European women. Trump hasn't learned any foreign languages. He doesn't really understand them. That's not one of his abilities. So Trump is, when he says that Macron is essentially gabbling on in French, what Trump is really hinting at is that Macron was being a poor host, that Macron was actually not living according to the amenities, the etiquette of the situation. And then Trump finishes the story by saying that when he listens to Macron explain what's going on in English versus French, it sounds different to him. And Trump says, wait a minute, that's not what we agreed. And that's a hint that Macron, he's subtly digging at Macron to claim that Macron's actually making double speak, that he's fraudulently speaking. Of course, this particular hint is very funny because Trump himself is known for doublespeak, for saying one thing and doing something else, for being crass and not continuing with what we would consider to be normal politeness, for being a bully. But these days, Trump has changed. Trump now is trying to convince people that he is the polite person. He's the person who knows the amenities. And it's absolutely delicious to Trump when he can go after Europeans. Remember, Trump understands what Europeans think of him, that Europeans think that Trump is basically a crass oaf, someone who doesn't really know how to be urbane, how to be sophisticated. So for Trump, every time he can make a statement that hints at the fact that a European is crass, has failed to live up to the amenities, has failed to live up to etiquette, it's a little point for Trump that he scores. And he really enjoys doing that to Europeans. In this image, Donald Trump enters into a fanfare, and you can see that in the moment before he enters, that he presses his lips together, which is sort of a getting ready stance to do something that's difficult or unpleasant. But the most interesting thing about this entrance of Donald Trump's is the air kiss with Melania Trump. Some people have claimed that Melania Trump and Donald Trump have a very antithetical relationship, that particularly Melania Trump is quite either angry or hateful or disgusted with Donald Trump. She is forced to go through her presidential wife identity with him. But I'm sure that their relationship is extremely transactional. And this was never part of the deal, that she would be on display and on show the whole time. And furthermore, obviously, she's had to live through the embarrassment of the Stormy Daniels trial that showed to all the world that Donald Trump was cheating on her while she was at home with a small baby. So it's quite likely that Melania Trump has a very strong dislike of Donald Trump. And that's just, I'm speculating now. But I suspect that she also knows a lot of his secrets. So Trump has a strange kind of respect for her. She's one of the few people who gets the last word with Donald Trump, because she, if she went to the press, she almost certainly would be able to destroy both his reputation and probably his presidency. In any event, there are lots of examples of body language where their relationship is not one of beatitude or friendliness or even warm caring, but is rather one of forms and etiquette and structure. And this is one of the classic examples where Trump has to kiss his wife, but she points out to him, "I've got makeup on, don't mess up my makeup." But really what this does is it prevents Trump from actually having to touch her, which she may even find upsetting or disgusting. So Trump gives her, she leans in just barely like this, and he gives her a little air kiss from about 4 centimeters away. You can see other examples like this. There are loads of them on the internet, in which Donald Trump will be walking with Melania and he'll be wanting a moment of just warmth and kindness, and he'll touch Melania on the hand and she'll slap his hand away. She really gives away a lot in body language, showing that she wants as little to do with him as possible. Likewise, when you see her appearing in the set piece of his inauguration, she wears a gigantic hat, which creates a huge amount of shade over her face. A lot of this helps to disguise her. I mean, obviously a hat does protect her against the sun, and she probably has an absolutely fantastic complexion, but also it creates a kind of dark shadow over her. So it's very hard to read her. And what she does in public a lot, particularly when I say in public with Trump, not when she's acting on her own steam. In public, she takes on a completely blank or neutral face. And you'll watch her and she will occasionally be watching a bit of what's going on in front of her. She might open her mouth a bit. But mostly, she's having her own little thoughts. Presumably, they're in a different language. They're not necessarily in English. And she does not look to interact with Donald Trump at all. Even when you watch these set pieces, other people are interacting and talking to one another and helping to pass the time. But Melania Trump remains completely separated from the course of action. She just takes her place, sits down, and has her own little thoughts for the most part.
Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions.
In this photo, what you can see is what you would call a regulator form of body language. Both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are making this gesture. So there are 5 different kinds of gestures. Regulators are one of them. Regulators, rather than being like iconic gestures, which say something specific, they regulate the conversation and they control how other people express themselves. So this kind of regulator is one where it's saying, please tamp down your emotions. Don't go any further. Stop. And what's happened is they're trying to say that Volodymyr Zelensky should stop with his emotional statements. It's actually, he's not over-emotionalizing, but he's in some ways giving them a lecture. And instead, Zelensky is positioned like this, which of course is stopping himself and also protecting himself from them. It's a mixture between protecting himself and stopping himself from expressing it. So, what happened in that meeting between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Volodymyr Zelensky was something that went a little out of control for Zelensky. I'd like to say that I don't think that Zelensky is wrong, but he, from a body language perspective and from a communication perspective, really made some very serious errors. What happened is, I think broadly speaking, Trump was looking forward to the event because he was hoping to get a deal signed and to maybe get some money for various mining contracts within Ukraine. But what happened is, at the beginning, J.D. Vance gave a little bit of a lecture to all assembled, including Volodymyr Zelensky, about how Joe Biden had let down the side. And it's a very ironic speech because, of course, Vance was claiming that Biden was basically warlike and demanding Vladimir Putin to, trying to overwhelm Vladimir Putin and use warlike gestures, whereas the Republicans and Donald Trump were trying to be more diplomatic, to open dialogue. So this irony in which Vance is claiming that the Republicans are the true diplomats and the true thoughtful people who believe in etiquette and conversation. This speech, which really the purpose of that speech, of course, was simply to take a dig at the Biden regime, really upset Zelensky. And Zelensky fell into a trap, not a deliberately set trap, but a mental trap, where he tried to correct J.D. Vance by answering one speech with another speech, where he used historical examples to prove, and this is the mistake that Zelensky made, to prove that the problem wasn't just the Biden regime, but that the Trump regime also allowed for Putin to run riot over Ukraine, and never actually controlled it with their diplomacy. But the problem is, because Zelensky tried to prove it, to hammer home his message, and to basically give a lecture, Vance immediately exploded. And almost the first words out of Vance's mouth were something like, "You need to be more respectful." Vance basically pointed out that it was disrespect that to use the TV cameras to litigate and argue with political speeches about what Trump did or didn't do. And from that point on, really, Zelensky was onto a bit of a loser. That is, he had already let down his guard, and rather than what he could have done in response to J.D. Vance's speech, says, yes, it's wonderful that Donald Trump believes in peace and in moving things forward so that it's good for the people of Ukraine, which of course may not be true, and Zelensky may not believe it, but it would allow for the continuation of the dialogue which was about to occur. But instead, everything went wrong from that point. there's a moment when Volodymyr Zelensky arrives. And Zelensky, remember, is quite a sophisticated character. In addition to being an actor and a successful businessman in Ukraine before he became president of the country, he believed that his goal in Ukrainian politics was to be an anti-corruption candidate. And this really doesn't sit well with Donald Trump. That's not the planet which Donald Trump is coming from. Donald Trump really admires Vladimir Putin because Vladimir Putin is corrupt. Vladimir Putin is the richest man on earth. Vladimir Putin is extremely powerful, and he's remained in power for over 20 years. So Trump views Putin, not Zelensky, as a kind of figure of admiration. Now, when Zelensky arrived by car, Trump decided to use his newfound attacks on etiquette to best advantage. And as Zelensky stood out of the car, Trump shook his hand, and then Trump looked at the cameras and said, look, he's got all dressed up for the occasion. So the first thing that Trump said was to essentially take a dig at Zelensky's dress as if Zelensky had failed in his etiquette. But of course, the kind of comment that Trump made is almost like asking a widow, why are you wearing black? Black is such a downbeat color. So in some ways, it was quite an interesting sort of pot shot at Zelensky. It was going to put Zelensky at a disadvantage from the very beginning. But for sure, my instinct was that Trump was quite open to signing some kind of deal on that day because it was advantageous to him, and that things went out of hand when Zelensky started giving J.D. Vance a history lesson. In this photograph, you can see J.D. Vance, in some ways, pontificating, making his statement. And Vance, Trump, and Zelensky are all sitting forward in a situation. Sitting forward is usually meant to signify that you are interested and listening and engaged. But other people in the room are in a different position, particularly Marco Rubio, who is sitting all the way back in his chair. So he's basically in a position and with his hands his fingers knitted in such a way that there's no question he's in the, I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm staying out of this. It's basically I'm inactive in this situation. He's holding himself back. At the same time, you have Keith Kellogg, whose facial expression, you can just see, he's just staring down. It's a kind of disappointment and hopelessness. It's just, why am I? Oh dear. So poor Keith Kellogg, as he's watching this, realizes that this is not a very good way to strengthen relationships with Ukraine and with Zelensky in particular, and to make things work better for America first, where we understand that America's first interest is to interact financially with Europe. If America loses its interactions with Europe, while it may not affect small businesses in the American heartland, it will have a profound impact on those American multinational businesses which do a lot of business with Europe.
And it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
So it's occasionally been said that Donald Trump is dyslexic. And from a body language perspective, you can really see that that's obvious. It happens a lot. Now, I'm not saying that Trump is illiterate. He can read small bits of text, like bullet points on a page, a few bullet points, or say a golf score. But big bits of text, whole paragraphs, the words start to swim in front of his eyes, and he just can't make them out. He's not really able to read at that level. And that's why he has no real interest in books. It's also why he, when he retired from his first presidency, he didn't go home and write his memoirs and focus on his presidential library like all other ex-presidents, because he has no interest in these things. Trump is completely uninterested in books, except the object of the book. He doesn't actually read books per se. The idea that Trump has read the Bible, particularly something like the King James Bible in archaic English, is really ridiculous. So the way that you can tell, a way that you can tell that Trump is pretty obviously dyslexic is in the interaction that Donald Trump had with Sir Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, on the 27th of February last month. In that interaction, which was in the White House, they were seated together, and as part of a way for Keir Starmer to strengthen US-UK relations, Starmer had brought an invitation from King Charles to visit Europe. And this invitation was in a letter, and Starmer presented the letter to Trump. And the way Trump responded is pretty unequivocal. Trump looked at the letter and said, he started talking to Starmer and said, am I, and then he looked at the camera and said, supposed to read this right now? And Starmer, not realizing that Trump is dyslexic, said, yes, I need to get your reaction, your response to this. So Trump opened the letter and held it in front of himself as if he was reading. And he made a few noises like, wow, nice, very nice. Very really nice, generic words that he didn't actually say anything about it. And then he made a few comments. He tried to show Charles's signature, which was something he really wanted to have, was proud of. And he said, this is really nice. And he said some very positive things, flattering things about what a great man King Charles is. And then, having said all those things, which were quite generic, he handed the letter back to Starmer and said, perhaps you would like to say what this very important paragraph, and then he let it off. He just didn't say any more. And Starmer, being quite biddable and also being a little bit Starmer had his mouth open the whole time during this interaction. During much of the interactions with Trump, he was following along, trying to stay out of trouble. Starmer was very biddable and took the letter and immediately explained to Trump what the letter said. And obviously to the whole audience as well. But the point is that at no point did Trump actually have to admit that he either had read or hadn't read or had understood what was in the letter.